Hi there, I'm Mark, and this is about the Norton Anthology, English literature, but this is specifically a story that is Celtish. Really enjoying this book. I'd previously done a Marie de France ode called Milan, and the next one is Lanval. And reading it, because it's mentioning Guinevere and King Arthur, I wonder if this is Lancelot. In my mind, not too sure. Either way, it's not very long. In the book, 4 or 5 pages. It goes quickly. It's a love story. It's about jealousy, and it's about the wrongful treatment of Lanval and how he stands up amazingly against a tyrannical king who is Arthur. King Arthur of the Round Table and his queen Guinevere. In the film Excalibur, we see Guinevere as being a bit of a lady. But Arthur, yeah, he's flawed, but generally he comes across in the myths as being someone we should respect. But not in this lay. It even starts off self-referential. So Marie de France writes, well, of course she doesn't write. I'm reading the English person's, it would have been different meter in the original language it was written. I think it was Mercian, with the middle part of England. Anyway, it starts off, the story of another lay, just as it happened, I will say. It's of a young, most noble man. He was called Lanval in Bretagne. She then goes on to talk about a city, Carlisle, but it wouldn't have been Carlisle at the point of writing here. So this is a modern word that's been transposed on it. She says, at Carlisle, or Caerluel, as it was known, there was sojourning Arthur, the valiant courtly king. Now, Carlisle's in the northwest of England. It's right next to Scotland. She does talk about Scottish and Pictish peoples laid waste all that land in war and raid. I don't think Wessex expanded that far north. And hey, there you go. Could have happened. What is interesting is she's using Scottish and Pictish. The Pictish people, made famous by the wearing of blue woad on their skin, would often go into battle like that, often naked, the men. They were the original inhabitants. The Scots, I believe, came over from Ireland and settled what we now know as Scotland. And she talks about the table round, the round table, and that the king, Arthur, had, I'll read it out, and to those of the round table, no greater band on earth, good land and wives to wed, he, that is Arthur, gave them all, save for one man, who'd served him well, Lanval. The king forgot this man, none put in a good word for him. So, at the very beginning, Lanval is hated. He's disliked. And as you go through this lay, it's quite easy to understand why, because he's not like the others. He has a real strong moral compass. And what he does in this story is he stands up against the tyranny of King Arthur, and specifically the abuse put on him by the Queen Guinevere. None of those two, Guinevere and Arthur, come across very well. Why was he hated? Straight away, she says, for his great valour, his largesse, his manly beauty, his prowess. He was much envied by most men. They made a show of loving him, but if he'd met with some mischance, no day would that be for laments. A king's son, of high lineage, he was far from his heritage. So I think he's come over from France, and very disliked because he's better than the others. He's come in, he's better looking, he's more powerful, he is the things that most of the Knights of the Round Table would love to be, but aren't. And how often does this happen in life? He was pilloried, he was hated, disliked, shunned. A foreigner in a foreign place, where to find help, protection, grace, oh, forget it. Nothing, it seemed, could bring him ease. So there he is, this man, on his own. He's been ignored by the king. But he's by a river, and suddenly he sees these damsels. They're a bit like sirens. They coax him to come to this tent. In the tent lay the demoiselle, and this is a woman who will disappear and come back. She's almost ethereal. She lay upon a gorgeous bed, worth a great castle was the spread, and a chemise was all she wore. And into the tent Lanval came. And as they do the deed. Her love, her body, she gave both. Lanval was now on the right path. And afterwards she turns to him and says, "Friend, I admonish you, command, beseech, in all you do, tell our sweet secret to no one. Here is my warning, all and some. Betray us, and you lose your lover. I shall be lost to you forever. Lost to your sight, lost our amours. My body never pleasure yours." And he would obey. And that's the setup. He's got to keep stum. Except Guinevere. He took his leave, got on his mount, off to the city then he went. Often he looked back, for our knight Lanval felt great dismay and fright, shaken by all these strange events, disturbed, depressed in heart and sense, amazed, he could not trust his thought. Had it all truly been, or naught? Home again at his hostelry, he saw his men dressed splendidly. That night he was a lavish host, where his wealth came from, no one guessed. And he kept quiet, and his lover kept coming regularly. Often she came, his sweet amie, to do his will most happily. Then the queen noticed the king's household there. She knew and recognized Lanval. The knights, delighted with the meeting, gave all the women joyful greeting. Taking them by the hands, their speech lacked no refinement, each to each. Lanval, though, stood alone apart, impatient, tumult in his heart. Great language. Guinevere confronts him and says, "Look, dear Lanval, you are much honoured and held dear. You may possess my love entire." But he doesn't. He does not. Oh, hell knows no fury like a woman scorned. That's the old saying, isn't it? At that the queen was furious, and she spoke slander, spoke it thus. The queen abandoned him, and she went weeping to her room. Great was her grief, rage, wounded pride. She was so shamed and vilified. Well, she was going to get revenge. And the story then goes on to effectively show how that is. She poisons, like worm tongue, the ear of the king. And Lanval is tried. Then on the designated day, the knights all gathered faithfully. The king and queen were there as well. The pledge was honoured by Lanval. Many there felt concern and grief. 100 men, it's my belief, would have done all within their might to liberate from trial this knight. He'd been accused most wrongfully. He had to give an explanation as to why he slighted the queen. The queen warped his words, and he had to say that there was another woman. Well, that meant then that woman was not going to show up. But at his trial, all is made well. So, spoilers obviously. Into the palace rode the lady. "Thou king must know the queen was wrong, and it was not so. He never sought her love at all." And it's because of the magnificence of this woman and her ethereal beauty coming in on a horse in front of the king, who said, "This man that you have accused of trying to get off with your queen was not the case." And therefore the evidence was for him, he was saved, and right at the end, with her he went to Avalon. More of Lanval no one has heard, I cannot tell another word. So as I said at the beginning, it's a Celtic story. It's about, interestingly, although it's written by Marie de France, who supposedly was from Mercia in the middle of the country of England, it's got the theme of the English fighting against the Celts, which did happen. In fact, the word for foreigner in Anglo-Saxon was Welsh, which is why the Welsh people who were persecuted, they was taken as often as slaves by the people, the Anglo-Saxons in the rump of the country of England. They would go and raid the Welsh in Wales, likewise disdain for the Celts. So it's that part of the world in which the British nation was starting to form, the English nation specifically, but they did not have good relationships with the Celts. But this story actually shows the tyranny of the English. Is quite interesting. The king or the queen tried to wrong a foreigner who happened to be French. This woman who he loves, his amie, not sure where she is, but I get this sense that she's part of the land. And they then go off to Avalon. And Avalon is a Celtic mythological island. It actually is a Welsh word. It means apple or apple tree. So this is bigging up the Celtic culture, isn't it interesting? Yet she, the writer, I'm assuming from France originally, is not giving a good taste of Arthur's court. So it's an interesting story and definitely well worth the read. It's a bit trite in part towards the end. All is made well, which is typical, as I'm finding of Marie de France. But it's not so much the story, it's the background, what's not said. It's this criticism of the English versus the Celtic nations. So there you are. The Norton Anthology, this one specifically chosen as part of the readathon for Nicole's Bookish Nooks Celtophile Readathon. So, Schlange Foil.